Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. Our next guest is the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, Mr. John Shannon. How are you?
I was thinking about that the other day. I think there's some more famous people from Oliver. I'm not sure who they are, but you know,
we're open for nominations.
I am so angry right now. I keep getting pictures from friends who are on the third hole at Fairview Mountain saying it's beautiful.
Yeah,
you know, and I just don't understand that. I mean, because I can't play Fairview Mountain these days.
Yeah, no.
Fall is a good time to be there.
Yeah,
fall.
You know what else happens?
Nothing better than September and October in the Okanagan. Trust me.
And you know what else happens in the fall, John, is it weeds out the unserious golfers. So you get the tee times a little bit more readily and the pace of play moves a little bit better. So it's a fantastic time of year here for golf, but also hockey. I know you're fond of Drop the Puck. Here we will do it tonight across 3 venues. And then, of course, tomorrow for the Vancouver Canucks. John, you told us when we spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, no step back. This is a Vancouver Canucks team you're very bullish on. Mm-hmm. You think they're better on paper as we sit here and now than the team that finished last year against Edmonton?
Do we put an asterisk beside Thatcher Demko, or what do we do?
Well, here's the thing. He didn't actually finish last season.
That's
he
true.
Was on
so it is as they ended.
But you can treat Demko's availability or lack thereof however you see fit, sir.
So I do like the team better this year than I did the end of season last year. I love the Jake DeBrusk acquisition. I think that Elias Pettersson will be better. I think that the learning curve that some of those young guys had to go through when they played in the playoffs is going to be valuable. I do suspect that Demko, and I listened to Darren yesterday, I do think that, Demko will be back hopefully before Christmas. And Dakota Joshua, once he's through his rehabilitation, will be a really valuable resource. So I like this hockey club. I like their depth. I love the big defense. So, I mean, I think that they're in a really good spot right now. Yeah.
We're going to fact check you here or correct you, and you can spread this to all the national guys there. If you're going to say Elias Pettersson going forward,
I know.
You're going to confuse everybody because that's the defensive prospect now.
Well, I guess D Pettersson versus E Pettersson. Is that what we should do?
It's Elias.
That'll work.
Elias versus Elias. Yeah. It's very confusing.
Although our Swedish friends are saying, "Are you really going to do that?" Like that's not right either.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Nevertheless,
I'm gonna. How about we just say number 40?
That's right.
Exactly. 40.
Like football guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 40 was good today. Yes.
Hey.
Okay. I hate nicknames. I really do. I just absolutely abhor nicknames. But if I have to call him EP40, I will call him EP40. How's that?
There you go. Right.
What kind of season do you think he's sitting on?
I think it's a 100-point season. I really do. And the question becomes, are we going to see more of the goal scorer Pettersson versus the playmaker Pettersson? And my gut tells me that I think we're going to see more of the playmaker. I think there's enough goal scoring on this roster that I think that he can now use those great hands to set other people up. And so my thinking is 100 points. And if you want numbers, how about 35-65?
What do you make of Patrick Allvin going back to it seems like every time there's a general Patrick Allvin availability, when he's talking about Pettersson, there's always a little challenge there. There's always a little bit of a poke. He's not tearing the player down, but there's always a little bit of a challenge of, what they expect. Is that too much, or do you think the player will respond to that sort of challenge?
He better. And this is where I'm on Patrick's side. They gave him a lot of money. He's now in that echelon of being one of the highest paid players in the National Hockey League, and he better bloody well show up. I mean, that's maybe Patrick should say that.
That's effectively what he is,
and he basically in many ways has Blake.
Yeah, for sure.
He said, show up. I think there's still some disappointment about where he was in the playoffs. You can argue whether the injury was one thing or how severe the injury was. But when you put your name on a contract for that type of money, you better perform. And I think that this is where the demands of this management team is putting Pettersson right now. And that's my expectation of him as well.
Speaking of this management team, how about another rabbit out of the hat, John? They're able to move the Pullman contract. They get a depth defenseman in Eric Brandstrom, and it allows them to start the season outside of LTIR. A word or two on the third year in a row where Alvin has been able to do something right at the death before rosters are set.
Yeah, for the price of a fourth rounder, I guess is not bad. At the same time, what does Patrick owe Chris McFarland now? I mean, that's what as you guys know, that club of 32 managers, there is some quid pro quo all the time. I'll look after you this time if you look after me next time. I do wonder at a certain point that if Chris needs some help, can Patrick help Chris? And so that to me is one of the fascinations of all this when these types of things do occur. I mean, when I read the release in Pullman and I went, oh man, that is, even though they're carrying a little bit of Pullman's salary, that is really, really well done in a very tough situation. And I mean, almost every Canadian team is probably in that point of trying to find a way to stay out of long-term injury reserve and trying to make sure that they're not compromising everything that they have in their prospect pool.
And the exception, of course, is the Edmonton Oilers, who spent the better part of yesterday jockeying to get Evander Kane onto LTIR. Vancouver's Evander Kane. He's going to miss a significant portion of the season. They also lost a player at one point, a pretty good prospect, on waivers. Now, we know they did some work in the offseason on the wing, John, in adding Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson, but it seemed, and of course, they Brown, the defenseman they waived, it seemed a disjointed offseason in Edmonton based on the fact there were two general managers at two different times in the summer. Do you think that comes back to haunt them? And how do you think the Oilers are going to maintain depth-wise here as a cap-tight LTIR team, missing a guy like Evander Kane?
Well, I do think they're going to miss Evander Kane at a certain point. He was irascible on the ice when he was healthy. He was a valuable player through some of their playoff runs when he was healthy. He is more valuable to them right now on LTIR. That's a reality of the National Hockey League in 2024. Stan Bowman was put in got his chance to come back, wasn't there on the 1st of July. So Jeff Jackson did all the legwork. But now Stan Bowman has a different philosophy. And I'm not suggesting it's 180-degree different philosophy, but it's at least 15% different. And so I think we're seeing that now. We're seeing Bowman's imprints on the Oilers. And it will be, I think it will be until Christmas time that we see even more of that, where Stan feels comfortable in what he's doing. I think he and Jeff work well together. They understand each other very well. But Stan Bowman is now that day-to-day guy. It's funny. It's a different relationship in Edmonton between Bowman and Jackson than it is between Alvin and Rutherford. It's almost juxtaposition when you think the experience Bowman has versus Jackson's inexperience as a president, and then you have Rutherford as the president with all the experience, and Alvin now in year number 4, I guess, in his job. So to me, I just think this is a growing pain for a team that's, by the way, the oldest team in the National Hockey League. And as long as you can maintain McDavid, Draisaitl, and a few of their young guys, Bouchard on defense, Ekholm, Nurse, Stuart Skinner in a goal, you're going to be fine as they whittle their way through the first half of the season.
Both teams are fine-tuning, but the fact you've got new management in Edmonton, is their fine-tuning going to mean maybe a bit more of a wander through the woods in the middle part of the season? What I'm saying is the division still up for grabs? Does that even matter? Is that a worthwhile question to ask, given both teams, will still be able to host be home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs? Do we care who wins the Pacific?
Well, no, I don't think we do. Who won the Pacific last year?
Yeah, the team that lost the playoff series.
Yeah. So, and did home ice mean anything?
Yeah, not much in that one.
No, and I think you have to throw Vegas into that mix too. So those three teams are probably going to vie for the top three positions. The question for me now is in the Pacific, are you only going to see three teams coming out of the division? Maybe you see five from the Central. That's a reality that could happen in the Western Conference.
The EA simulation is Seattle getting in for whatever that's worth, if you think they've got a surprise in them.
Well, I looked at the Kraken roster yesterday, and I think it's improved. It really has. And then I got thinking, is it because I think that there are recognizable names now? Like, you go through the roster, and there's really some big names on that team when you think of Montour and Stevenson being added. Adam Larson on defense re-signed in Seattle. But can they, and Dan Bilesman's got a tough job. I don't see Seattle being that fourth team at this point. But you know what, they are certainly going to be better than they were in the second half last season.
For me, Seattle pivots on two things. Number one, goaltending, because last year they had all sorts of troubles there until Joey Decord came in and settled it down a little bit. I'm not sure he's the answer, but co-started with Grubauer. And then secondly, how much improvement do you get from your young players? Like, Beniers was 37 points last year in 77 games. Wrights made the team. Okay, is he ready to pop as the top five pick? And then Riker Evans, the defenseman who they had high hopes for last year, played half the season and did okay, but if he takes the next steps. So if you've got two centermen and the defenseman who take significant steps forward this year, then I like Seattle's depth. And if they get the goaltending, I think they could be a real dark horse, but any of those things fall apart, and I'm with you guys. I'm not sure the Kraken.
Well, and let's face it, since the team entered the National Hockey League, and I'm a huge Ron Francis fan, I think that if you got a couple of beers in him and a quiet night in Yaletown, he might regret the Grubauer contract, because that to me, I mean, Grubauer was supposed to answer a lot of questions from the first year. And I look at their goaltending, and again, I mean, I recognize the name. I think he should be better than he is, and he isn't. And I think that's a real challenge in Seattle.
Goaltending is a hell of a drug. You need it.
And then it becomes a question, if you're not on Seattle, do you have anybody in the Pacific Division that you fancy? I don't know. It'd be I think difficult to make a case for Anaheim.
Los Angeles.
Well, where are you on LA, John? Because I'm actually not too fussy about LA anymore. I'm not sure at one point there several years ago, it looked like they had so many young assets, so much upcoming talent that it was hard to go wrong. I have not loved the way that Rob Blake and company have managed that roster over the last few years.
No, but there are a couple of young guys on that team that are pretty good. They are going to miss Drew Doughty, let's face it, for, I would guess, until Christmas time. It certainly sounds that way. Again, you do wonder about goaltending there again. I think that they've kind of blended in with the rest of the mushy middle for me. 2 years ago, they were a team that were on the rise. Todd McClellan had this team in a pretty good position and going in the right direction. And not a knock at Jim Hiller, I just don't see much there. And I do see Andrzej Kopitar getting older. Quentin Byfield is the real deal. Quentin Byfield is a great young player, but I don't see much more there. And I'd like to be wrong with them because they're good people. I think Rob Blake's in a tough spot this year.
Byfield and Clark are going to have their day in the sun. It's just not going to be this year.
Clark could be the full, it could be the ticket here, because without Doughty, you were really thin on right side D. In fact, like Kyle Burrows may play second pair there,
but they're not, he's
that's a lot to put on a young guy.
Right. It's the second year of an ELC.
No, I know, I know,
so much he
but
can do.
you know, he has the pedigree. He's terrific with the puck. I think he's going to have to be a catalyst for them there. And John's right. Like if Byfield takes the next step, not sort of unlike the young Kraken players too. If Byfield takes the next step, watch out.
I tell you what, Matty, I think he's already taken that step. I really do. His coming out party was the playoffs 2 years ago against Edmonton. And even though they didn't win the series, people walked out of the arena saying, wow, that Byfield is going to be a star. And I think he became that star last season.
Yeah, 55 points. And I mean, you watch him move with that sort of size. He's only scratching the surface. He actually reminds me a little bit of Eric Lindros when I watch him play.
Oh, yeah.
John, which is a terrifying thought. Yeah.
So strong.
I know he hasn't played down the middle much yet, although he may factor there eventually. But, you know, the enormous size, the way he moves, maybe not quite as physical yet. We'll see. And then, of course, you look over the Central, where I think everybody suspects that Colorado and Dallas are going to be playoff teams. I like Nashville. I didn't love the contracts they gave those two players, those two forwards, but I think they will have an impact this year. Not to mention, as we've talked about, Nashville has all sorts of future assets to play. And so the question for me there is Utah or Minnesota. Is one of those teams going to step up and say we're a playoff club?
Well, I think I can't see Minnesota still doing it. I think this is the last year of the hangover there. They're still around $15 million under everybody else when the cap, when you think of dead money with the Parise and Suter contracts. I do like Utah. I think Utah is going to be a fun team to watch. Goaltending will be the key there. Connor Ingram is going to be under a ton of pressure to respond. You guys are forgetting Winnipeg.
Well, that was going to be my last question.
Winnipeg is not a bad hockey club. Winnipeg looks like on paper that they haven't made many changes. That's the frustration with Jets fans. But they still have Connor Hellebuck. They still have Josh Morrissey. They still have Kyle Connor. And so I think and they've signed Mark Scheifele to this long-term deal a year ago. I think this is Mark Scheifele's moment, and he has to respond. He has to elevate to be that player that everybody has given him credit for. He has not responded well enough in the last few years, and he needs to. He needs to bear down. 82 games is a long season, and Mark Scheifele better show up every night.
Yeah, that's a fair shout, John. I should have involved Winnipeg.
John, from a business standpoint, how important is the season to Winnipeg? Because there's not, like if they stub their toe, I'm really worried about the pictures that we're going to see in Winnipeg.
It's going to be difficult there. They have to work hard. This is something that I don't think anybody in Winnipeg ever envisioned when they. We were all there on that afternoon when they sold out the building in 11 minutes. But it's come back to roost, and Winnipeg, the Jets have to re-engage with the franchise in so many ways. And that's a real challenge in a town that loves their sports, but has been hit hard economically in the last 5 years. And really, quite frankly, the team has underperformed in the postseason.
Always been a fickle market, though. I can remember some great Bombers teams not drawing as people thought, and let's face it, just not a big market by NHL standards. Right. And you know, I know Mark Chipman is the face of ownership there, but as I always say about the Jets when they talk about financial struggles, David Thompson could buy and sell every other owner the league over.
Sure, he could, but David Thompson never ever envisioned that team losing money. That team, even
it's pro sports, man. Like from time to time, when you suck, you lose money. That's kind of how it works.
For the first 7 years, he was right.
Yeah,
first 7 years he was right, and the last 3 have been have been really hard.
Yeah. Anyways, great stuff, John. So excited for the season here. Thank you for this. You'll be joining us on Tuesdays.
I have one question for you guys. Could you imagine? Could you envision the Vancouver Canucks playing a 1:30 Tuesday game at home and the fans not being upset?
See, I sort of love it
On
as
opening night,
a one-off
yes.
for opening.
But hold on. Sure, you love it when it's in Seattle, but would you love it if it was Vancouver?
Fair point. If I'm a ticket holder and I've got kids in school today and I have to sort of rearrange my day to make it to the hockey game and pay for the privilege of it, I don't know.
1:30 Tuesday afternoon babysitter. What?
Mm-hmm.
Seriously?
Yeah. John, enjoy the Kraken game. And we'll catch up with you because we know you can watch. You ain't got anything else to do. You're not playing golf today.
Sure.
Until next Tuesday.
Cheers.